Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well. This will be the last bonus until tonight's live stream, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope to see you all there. Before we get into this very interesting, scientific, and horrifying upload, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's final bonus, shall we? The Hopi Indians settled in the U.S. state of Arizona and who claimed to have come from a continent that had disappeared in what is now the Pacific Ocean. Remember that their ancestors were instructed and helped by beings that moved on flying shields, and that they taught the technique of tunnel construction in underground installations. Many other legends and indigenous traditions of the American continent speak of the existence of communication networks in underground cities. There is a large literature, enough researchers who support the hypothesis that intelligent beings unknown to us live below the surface of our planet. There are various hypotheses about the possibility that intelligence from outside of our planet have subterranean or underwater footholds on planet Earth. The Hopi claim that their ancestors came from sunken islands in the remote past in what is now the Pacific Ocean, and that those who helped them in their exodus to the American continent were human-like beings who mastered the technique of flight and the construction of tunnels and underground facilities. The Hopi are now settled in the state of Arizona, near the Pacific coast. Between them and the coast is the state of California, and in the extreme north of California there is a snowy, white volcano called Shasta. The native legends of the place explain that inside there is an immense city that serves as a refuge for a race of white men endowed with superior powers, survivors of an ancient culture that disappeared in what is now the Pacific Ocean. The only alleged witness who entered the city, Dr. Dorrell, stated in 1931 that the way in which the buildings were built reminded him of Mayan or Aztec construction. The name Shasta does not come from English, nor from any Native American language or dialect. Instead, it's a Sanskrit word, which means wise, venerable, and judge. Without having a notion of Sanskrit, the native traditions speak of its tenants as venerable beings who dwell inside the White Mountain because it is a gateway to the inner city of millenary antiquity. More recent notifications from the inhabitants of a nearby weed lumberjack colony refer to sporadic appearances of beings dressed in white robes that enter and leave the mountain, only to disappear again as a bluish flash that can be seen. Narratives collected from the Sioux Apache confirm that conviction of the Hopi and indigenous people of Mount Shasta region that in the subsoil of the American continent dwells a race of white-skinned beings, survivors of a land sunk in the ocean, but also much further north. In Alaska and even further north, Eskimos and natives speak again and again of a race of white men that live in the subsoil of their territories. Descending towards the south in the spring of 77, a belief that under the pyramid of the sun in the city of the gods hides on the opposite side of the earth's crust, that is, in the interior underground, a city in which the white god is said to be found. If from here we move to the Yucatan Peninsula, we will find in its extreme north, hidden in the thickness of a jungle, a city discovered in 1941 that extends over an area of 48 kilometers, and that keeps in the silence of oblivion more of 400 buildings that in some remote time knew splendor. It was found by a group of boys who were playing in the vicinity of a lagoon where they used to bathe, ran into a wall of worked stone hidden by vegetation. Not having the Mexicans sufficient resource to undertake an exploration of the place, they required North American help. Attending two archaeologists specializing in Mayan culture. Attached to the Middle American Research Institute of the University of New Orleans. They also determined that the project to clean up and study the enormous city exceeded their possibilities, so they would have to create an association with other entities. World War II managed to momentarily shelve the project until 1956. The University of New Orleans associated this time with the National Geographic Society and with the National Institute of Anthropology of Mexico, resumed the investigations. Andrews, the archaeologist who led the expedition, dedicated himself, while the team of workers began to clear the buildings, to collect information among the natives of the region. A shaman told him that the city was called Tzbilcholta, a word that was unknown in the local Mayan language, and that the lagoon was called Sleca, which translates to Old City. Wanting to find out the reason for this name, the North American archaeologist was told a legend handed down by the natives from generation to generation, which stated that at the bottom of the lagoon there was a part of the city that rose above on the jungle, according to the narration of the old shaman. Many centuries before, there was a great palace in the city of Tzbilcholta. One afternoon, an unknown old man arrived at the place and requested lodging from the ruler. Although showing obvious ill will, he nonetheless ordered his slaves to prepare a room for the traveler. Meanwhile, the old man opened his traveling bag and took out a huge green gemstone, which he gave to the sovereign as a token of gratitude for the lodging. Surprised with the unexpected present, they questioned the guest about where the stone had come from. As the old man refused to answer, his host asked if he had any other precious stones in his bag. And since the interrogated continued to remain silent, the sovereign flew into a rage and ordered his servants to immediately execute the foreigner. After the crime which violated the sacred rules of lodging, the cacique himself checked his victim's bag, supposing that he would find more valued objects. But in his despair, he only found some old clothes in an unattractive black stone. Filled with rage, the sovereign threw the stone out of the palace. As soon as it fell to the ground, a formidable explosion originated, and immediately the ground opened, engulfing the building, which disappeared under the waters of the well, which emerged at the exact point where the stone fell to the ground. The sovereign, his servants, and his family ended at the bottom of the lagoon, and they were never seen again. So far, the legend. But let's continue with these ruins of the Yucatan Northern. The expedition ended up unblocking the pyramid that housed idols different from the usual representations of Mayan deities. Other nearby building would be revealed as much more important. It was a construction that totally differed from traditional Mayan styles, offering architectural features never seen in any of the known Mayan cities. Inside the temple, all adorned with representations of marine animals, Andrews discovered a secret sanctuary, walled off with a wall, in which there was an altar with 7 idols representing deformed beings, hybrids between fish and men, beings similar, therefore, to those who in remote times revealed inconceivable astronomical knowledge to the Dogon in Central Africa and to those referred to by the Assyrian tradition when they speak of their divinity, Oannes. In 1961, Andrews returns to the Yucatan, accompanied by his associates, 2 experienced divers, who had to complete the better equipment the dive attempt made in 1956 by David Conkle and W. Robindet, who reached the depths of 45 meters, at which they gave up due to the lack of prevailing light. In this second attempt, the divers were the experienced archaeologist Marden, famous for having found the 1956 remains of the HMS Bounty, the ship of the Great Mutiny, and the B. Little House. After the first probes, they saw clearly that the lagoon developed in a shape similar to a boot, continuing underground to a point that the diving archaeologists were unable to determine. Upon reaching the bottom of the vertical, they noticed that there was a fairly steep slope there, heading toward the underground section of the shaft, and there they found several remains of carved columns and remains of other constructions, with which it seemed to confirm that the legend of the Sunken Palace was based on a real event. This enclave of the Yucatan presents certain similarities with the ruins of Nan Matol, the dead city of the Pacific Ocean, in which Native Americans claim to have come from. There is also an enigmatic abandoned city devoured by the jungle. At those feet, in the depths of the sea, the divers also discovered columns and buildings engulfed by the water. We are going to the other coast of Mexico, slightly further south, in Jalisco, and about 120 kilometers inland from Cape Cornetes. The indigenous people say that the underground temple is hidden, in which the empire of the universe once stayed, and that when the current evolutionary cycle ends, the ancient displaced people will once again rule the earth with splendor. Such an affirmation is related to the legacy contained in the passageways of Tawuwari in the jungle of Ecuador. From here to the south to the Mexican state of Chiapas, along the border of Guatemala, some different white-skinned natives live there, for whose underground secrets President Roosevelt himself had already been interested in March 1942. Well, the Lacandones, who know of their ancestors, say that in the extensive underground network that crisscrosses their territory, some gold sheets are found in some secret place, on which someone left written the history of the ancient peoples of the world, in addition to describing precisely what would be the Second World War, which would involve all of the most powerful nations on Earth. This story reaches Roosevelt's ears a few months after the United States suffered the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Similar gold plates are also closely related to those that we will later see are hidden in the aforementioned tunnels of the Tawuwari in Ecuadorian East. Let's continue south. The next step that is taken from Chiapas steps on the Guatemalan soil. In 1689, the missionary Francisco Fuentes Guzman had no problem describing wonderful structure of tunnels of the town of Pachuta, which runs through the interior of the earth, to the town of Tecpan in Guatemala, located about 50 kilometers from the beginning of the underground structure. At the end of the 40s of the last century, a book appeared titled Incidents of a Trip to Central America, Chiapas, and the Yucatan, written by North American lawyer John Lloyd Stevens, who visited Guatemala on a diplomatic mission in the company of his friend and artist Frederick Catherwood. There, in Santa Cruz del Quiche, an old Spanish priest recounted his visit years before to an area located on the other side of the mountains and 4 days' walk in the direction of the Mexican border, which was inhabited by a tribe of natives that still remained in the original state in which they were found before the conquest. At the press conference held in New York sometime after the publication of the book, he added that, gathering more info in the area, he found out that these natives had been able to survive in their original state thanks to the fact that whenever strange troops appeared, they hid under the earth in a subterranean world endowed with light, whose secret was bequeathed to them in ancient times by the gods who dwell underground. And he provided his own testimony of having begun to retrace a tunnel under one of the buildings in Santa Cruz del Quiche, through which, in the opinion of the natives, it was once possible to reach Mexico in an hour. In October of '85, together with San Jose Benitez and the Vilches brothers and Gretchen Anderson, who, by the way, was born at the foot of Mount Shasta, where we started this, there was an opportunity to access a tunnel excavated in the subsoil of a farm located in the mountains of Costa Rica. They entered a large cavity, and it gave way to an artificial tunnel that descended almost vertically into the depths of the terrain. The locals, who had been cleaning that tunnel of earth and stone that blocked it for years, told of a story affirming that at the end of this is the Temple of the Moon, a sacred building, one of several buildings expressly built underground millennia ago by an unknown race which, according to their records, had built an underground city of over 500 buildings. And further south, in 1986, alone in a intricate jungle that in the Ecuadorian Amazon would take to the mouth of a tunnel system known as Los Teos, Tawuwari in the language of the Javaras who guard them, in which the Hungarian ethologist, seeker, adventurer, and miner Janos Marquez had found years before, and after searching the entire South American subcontinent, an authentic library of metal plates. In them, the chronological relationship of history to humanity, the origin of man on Earth, and the scientific knowledge of the extinct civilizations were engraved with signs and ideographic writing. According to these testimonies collected, from there, two main underground paths departed, one headed east toward the Amazon basin in Brazil territory, and the other headed south to run through the Peruvian subsoil to Cozcu, Lake Titicaca on the border of Bolivia, and finally reach the area bordering Arica in the extreme north of Chile, according to the information carefully collected in Brazil by a German journalist, Karl Brugger, with whose murder in the 80s the documents of his investigation disappeared. Various cities hidden in the wilderness would be found in the upper Amazon basin, buildings that were built by beings from outer space in remote times, and which would connect with a system of 13 hidden cities inside the Andes mountain range. Linking with this knowledge, we know from the time of the conquest that the natives hid their enormous wealth underground to avoid looting by the Spanish. Everything seems to indicate that they used the underground system that existed long before, built by a race long before the Inca, and to which some of them had access thanks to the legacy of their ancestors. Possibly the Atacama Desert in Chile is the end of the journey in the extreme south. We are talking then at the end of the journey of the area that the traditions of the Hopi Indians cited at the beginning of the article up there in North American Arizona. They point to a point of arrival of their ancestors who, aided by beings who mastered both the secret of flight and construction of tunnels and underground facilities, they were forced to hastily abandon the lands they occupied in what is now the Pacific Ocean. But the location of the specific signals which exist, the adequate deciphering of their corrective keys which exist, as well as the decision to take the committed step inside is, as always, happens in every sincere seeker, such a task comprised as non-transferable. To me, what this states is that these underground tunnels, underground bases, DUMs, have existed long before humanity. I think in my own just things that I've read that our planet was inhabited by other beings well before us. They built cities underground. I mean, if you think about the one temple that was found with half man, half animalistic creatures, what's that point to? That points to a Dogman in my eyes. And yet there is some kind of, I forget the name of the otherworldly beings, but that look like dog humanoid creatures. I don't know. All right, guys, a lot of very interesting information I just shared. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Guys, thank you for supporting the channel. Your support is what makes the channel special and what continues for it to grow and go. With that being said, please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this info with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions and never stop looking for answers.